All right, we're gonna start. So, if you could give me your name, like age, where you go to school, just like quick rundown of who you are, like what you do, and like your interest in shoes and how you got your start, stuff like something like that.
All right, my name's Dre Davis. I'm 17. I go to Isidore Newman High School. I really got into sneakers about middle school, like sixth grade. I was really just interested after seeing people on YouTube with like all these off-whites and stuff. It just always looked really cool to me, and then I just started collecting and having fun with it.
All right. So, do you consider yourself in the beginning, at least, or I guess however you can interpret this, like, do you see yourself more as a reseller, collector, or mix, or has it changed over these past?
Um, I see myself as a mix of the two. Like for the past 3 years, I would say I got into reselling. I've cooled off a little bit just because focusing on schoolwork and stuff like that, but more so leaning towards the collecting side and reselling is like a hobby.
So, reselling kind of like funds the collecting almost. Oh,
In a way, yeah, it definitely helps. It
okay.
definitely helps a lot.
Okay. So when did you start resale? I don't know if you said that or if I didn't hear.
I started reselling about 3 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. So do you remember that like first pair of shoes that like you got or that you sold that was like, okay, I'm getting into shoes. This is something I want to continue collecting, reselling, etc.
The very first pair. Um, wow, I remember I think it was a pair of cool gray fours.
Yeah.
And that was the first pair. I sold them on Poshmark for a little bit above the retail value. And I was like, wow, man. Even though it wasn't much like me as a middle school kid, I'm like, wow, I can really like start to do this. Let me ask my grandpa if he'll support me like doing the reselling and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's kind of more or less how I started too.
Yeah,
Same idea. So in these last couple of years, as you've seen, as you said, you've obviously slowed down with school and high school and all that.
right.
How do you, or from what you know and what you've seen, obviously you're still in touch with it. How do you think, especially with COVID, like the last 3 years, how do you think sneaker reselling and collecting personally for you has like changed? Has it become easier? Has it become harder? Has like the market decreased? Like, what's your take on that?
Um, I think to a certain extent, reselling has become harder just because of like Nike somewhat overproducing goods. And then like after COVID, the market just start began to depreciate a lot. So I think reselling is becoming more difficult for people to get into.
So do you think in like the next 2 years there'll be like less and less people getting in, and like you think would be called quote unquote dead at that point, or do you think it's gonna? Yeah.
Um, in my opinion, I feel like in the next 2 years there may be like a quote unquote crash. And then until like the big retailers like Nike, Adidas, and like the Foot Lockers and stuff, once they get their game together and realize like this can't continue like this, then we may begin to see another increase in the production.
Okay. You mentioned Adidas when you were saying that. What is your take with the whole Kanye West and like how people think he's essentially Adidas and like the whole fallout issue?
Yeah, I mean, you can see on like Confirmed app and stuff like that, Yeezy slides, foam runners, all that is sitting right now. So, I mean, it kind of just goes to show you how a company's only as good as their biggest asset. And when Kanye left, they're really struggling, like getting rid of all these Yeezys that they've overproduced.
Do you think like do you think it's ever gonna change where Yeezys will continue going up in value, or is this kind of like Yeezys are dead and
I
Adidas
think
is
I
dead?
think this is the end of Yeezys for as we see it. I think like the more popular stuff, like maybe the Wave Runners, the Zebras, and like all the Nike products, maybe those will continue to go up in the future. But like the production that Adidas still has, that's pretty much dead in my opinion.
So like for you selling wise, say you did get like a pair of Yeezys or some
Mhm.
slides or something. What is your like go-to sell? Like where do you sell it first? Do you go onto apps like eBay, StockX, or do you have like local people that you sell to?
I tend to lean more towards apps just because like ease of use, like and also stadium goods, like they have a good consignment program. But yeah, stuff like that. I
Okay. So
tend
you
to lean
yeah.
towards apps, yeah.
So is it Like in terms of profit, like you think you consistently get more like okay, sorry. Compare to if you were to sell locally, you think in the end, due to like the ease of it, selling online, stock exchange goods is just overall just better.
I think I think it just depends on your lifestyle and like what you have available to you. Like for my example, the time wise and ease of purchase, yeah, it's worth it to me to sell on these apps and take the fee. But if you have the ability to find local people and get build those relationships, then yeah, it's worth it.
Okay. So obviously like if you sell an app, say you had like a trying to think of like say you had like the Ama ones, the Jordan ones,
Okay.
like they used to resell for good, but now they're like 20 over
Right.
retail. So like if you were to sell like for that shoe like that, like how do you decide that A, I want to buy that shoe to resell or like no, I'm staying away from it. Like what is your mindset when you're looking for a shoe to resell, not to collect?
That's a great question. Um, Usually I go on like different websites and stuff to see like the projected devalue of the product after all the shipments and stuff comes out. So realistically, if like my margin of profit is like within or less than $40 once I see like on these projected websites and stuff, then I'll be like, I probably should stay away from these.
Okay, got you. I feel like I don't know, this might just be me, but like last 6 months has been like really iffy for those 40 like consistent $40 profit.
Right.
You had your Jordan 4 breads, you had your lost and founds, but that was like last year. I feel like I don't know, it's getting rare, harder and harder, and especially with like the increase in stock numbers and everything. Like,
That is true.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So you mentioned like connections. You don't have an Instagram, like you don't resell on Instagram, right?
No,
Or any of that.
I do
So
not.
like I don't know, based on what you've seen, like you think networking in terms of the shoes rather than selling on apps is very important, or do you think at least for you, given your success, do you think it's really worth it to at least do Instagram at least?
Oh, networking is amazing. If you have the time and resources, I think networking would be amazing. Like I would try to get into that. I just feel like I haven't been able to, but networking helps you obviously be able to sell at those higher prices, get more profit. It allows you to get some more sellers like you to build profit, like get basically items for you to hold and stuff like that.
Right.
And then yeah, it's just overall like I feel like you're more into the sneaker game if you're like building connections and stuff like that, more information.
So you mentioned like oh sorry, like when you buy your shoes for collecting, just going a different route.
Okay.
Do you buy from local Instagram or also through platforms?
So for collecting, usually I tend to lean more towards eBay because I like to buy shoes like slightly used because obviously the value depreciates and they're easier since you're already gonna be wearing them and using them, it just makes more sense. But you can find really good sellers on Instagram and stuff like that that sell for a really decent price. So I also use eBay and Instagram.
Uh,
Yeah.
so like in those processes and in reselling, collecting, like what challenges or a couple challenges that you've faced that you think, oh wow, like good thing I overcame that because like I don't know if I would kept reselling or just minor stuff that you like remember. If you could just give some insight on that.
Oh, let me think. So there has been times where I bought like three pair of shoes and they didn't really do what I wanted to, and I just felt like I was in a hole.
Yeah.
So when stuff like that happens, like you just have to figure out for you what time is a good when's a good enough time to sell so you can like reduce your losses, like cut your losses. Um I'm trying to think of an example of this. I th- it was a pair of 350s. It was some gray pair,
Yeah.
but I think it was 20 under market. So when I went to sell, I'm like, wow, should I just get rid of these now? Do I think they're just gonna keep depreciating? So yeah, those kind of decisions are hard to make.
So going off of that, like How long? So say you buy a shoe that thought was gonna go over 50 over 50 over retail, but it turns out like 15 under ask or something like or 50 under
Yeah.
retail. Like what's the timeline? What's the mindset when you're like, okay, cut my losses, get some of my money back, or you're like, okay, I'm gonna hold this out. Like what is your timeline? Do you say like, oh, okay, I'm gonna wait 2 months and then I'll sell, or is it like just get the money
Right.
back
So
instantly?
I think over that initial first 2 month period, you kind of have to like keep checking the market value, check like websites, IGs, make sure like, oh, maybe this can go up in the future. Like just look at projections and stuff like that. But I think if you haven't seen like even like a $20 increase in like a 2 month period, then you probably need to let them go.
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard someone like give actual numbers for that. So
Yeah.
good to hear. Um, you mentioned like IG and like looking at these pages. Like, what for you? What has been the best websites, resources to understand? Like, okay, this is a pair I'm going to go for. This is a pair I'm not going to go for. Like, what has worked the best for you?
So there's a couple of IG websites I like to look at. Like I think one's called Hype for Leaks or something like that. There's multiple of those out there. There's a bunch of okay, I was in a cook group, so that also helped like projection and stuff like that, getting information. So cook groups and IGs, yeah.
Okay, for sure. For people that like want to get into reselling, like, I'll just ask the first part. Like, what would be your advice to them if they wanted to get into reselling from not the collecting standpoint, but from like actually making money?
Right. Um, my advice would be have sufficient capital because without capital, you're very restricted in what you want to do. Like say you want to get into reselling, but like the stuff that's releasing is like projected to go up future wise. Okay, well, you just don't have the ability to hold that stuff. So you'll be looking at like $20 profit per pair. So like if you have enough capital, I would say then it's worth it to get into reselling because you can have more holds.
Okay. And do you think right now or the next 6 months is a good time to get into reselling if you're looking to make money?
Hmm. I think in I think if you want to get started reselling, then you probably should start right now because this market is like very uncertain. Like the best time to get into it was probably like that 3 year period
Yeah.
ago. But yeah, the market is just very uncertain. So if you want to start, come in right now, I would say.
Okay. So going in a different route, obviously the name of the brand, not necessarily the name of the brand, but like the name of the collaboration plays a huge factor in a lot of these
Right.
shoes. But recently that kind of has dropped down in my opinion because like Travis Lowe's usually 1K plus or
Yeah.
like 800 tops right now, especially with the
Right.
olives and the phantoms. So for you at least and what you've seen, how do you think hype is playing a role? Do you think it's not meaning as much as it used to? Do you think it's just a fluke on the color design for Travis's, for example, or do you think these names are just getting too much where people don't necessarily want them anymore?
Hype is playing a large role, but I feel like it's beginning to be diminished. Like you used the example for the Travis Scotts. Like there's so many of these colorways out there. People are kind of just getting tired of Jordan 1 low, Jordan 1 low, and like things like off-white. I think the hype on that has decreased a lot after Virgil's death because people are like, well, he's not designing the shoes. Why do I need to buy it? They're just pushing out stuff to make money. So I feel like hype does play a factor, and the value of like the name associated to these sneakers is beginning to decrease.
Okay. Yeah, I have that same opinion. Obviously, like Travis's, no matter the colorway, are still gonna be like 500 plus. So I mean,
Right.
obviously not like fragment lows, but still solid money. And
Yeah.
going off that, like you mentioned off white. So going in also a different direction, but like what are your thoughts with like the fashion at least? I'm not big into fashion, but I know you have Eric Emanuel stuff and all that. So like compared to the sneaker stuff, do you think streetwear, I guess, is like also declining, or what's your take on all that whole?
Streetwear is also declining simply for the fact, like I'm sure you've seen on TikTok, like panda buy people, yada yada yada. It's just a scary market to get into because you don't know what's real and you don't know what's fake. So, getting verification for all these stuff like it's began to be a hassle, and that's taking a toll on the market.
So you think authenticity, at least for the streetwear stuff, is much more important than the sneaker?
Yeah, I think so because it's much easier to produce fake clothes than fake sneakers.
Okay, for sure, for sure. So going into your collecting side, so what was like, what was like the first shoe that it was like, okay, this is something I'm not getting rid of my collection. Like this is staying
Whew.
here forever.
The first shoe. Let me just look over at this wall real quick. Um, I would say the Zebra 350s. Probably because like that was just the biggest grail like during the hype beast days. I always used to see that on YouTube. So probably the 350s.
Okay. So like over time, like with resale and all of this, what do you think? Like, do you think what you desired 3 years ago as part of your collection has changed over time, or has it been pretty consistent? Like, I always want that Kobe, those Kobe Grinches, or has it been like, okay,
hmm
maybe I want some Jordan 4s now? So, like, what's your opinion on it?
Um, I think over time it has changed simply for the fact that when I first got in, I was looking at like, oh, these shoes are tough because they're so expensive, like these off whites, yeah, yeah, yeah. Just looking at the name and stuff like that. But now, like some of these shoes I look at and I'm like, wow, I barely even wear these. And it's just because like my perceptions of shoes has changed. Like I'm more lean towards like buying shoes now for outfits and stuff instead of just like to have like the name. So yeah, it's changed.
So, you think reselling and collecting obviously are very closely related, but do you
Right.
think the market for collecting, in the sense that like it's easier to collect right now? Do
Oh
you,
yeah, for
okay,
sure.
so 100%. So, like, as in, like, the prices are dropping, or is it just like there's more product?
The prices are dropping and because of overproduction, like for these newer Nike releases, basically, yeah, the prices are lower and it's easier to get hands on one of the pair of shoes.
Okay, and now looking at, like, the bigger grails, like you said, the Off-Whites,
hmm
uh, what like, the Fragments or whatever, like, do you think those are easier as well, or is it all or do you think is it kinda flipped in the sense of, like, these shoes are much rarer?
I think it, yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I think it's harder to get these grills nowadays because they're starting to become older and there's just less and less and less because more people are trying to get their hands on them before they get to that point where they're unwearable. So
Right.
yeah, I think it's harder.
Okay, and then, like, within those shoes that you had to get, like, I know you got the Travis Highs, like, you have any cool story or any cool memorable experience on getting that, like, true real grail?
Let me look at these. Okay. Funny story with the purple lobsters. So I was on eBay scrolling, right?
Yeah.
I was looking at lobster size 10. I There was 1 minute left on the eBay on one of them. So I clicked on the purple lobsters and I bid like what was it? 750. And so someone what is it called when they
Like, snipe
like
you?
they go higher right after
Yeah.
you?
Snipe, like a
Yeah.
pit snipe, yeah.
Yeah. So basically I had to find another pair of those and I find a slightly used pair like I think a whole month later. Like it took me a long time because purple lobsters are hard to come by these days. So yeah, that was very frustrating, but looking back on it, it's kind of funny how I just got overplayed right in that last moment and it cost me 2 more months of waiting for a pair.
Yeah, that kinda sucks. Like, do you think in, like, a year or 2 before you go to college or whenever, really,
hmm
do you think it's gonna be easier to sell these shoes in the sense that, say you spent 1,000 on something, you think you could sell it for 1,100, or these prices are gonna keep depreciating?
Um I think it I think it depends on the shoes. Like the normal like Jordans and stuff like that, like the pine greens and stuff. that stuff might actually depreciate. Like I have some cool grays right here, and I feel like those are getting cheaper and cheaper.
Right, yeah.
But I feel like the off whites and stuff, those may continue to increase in value just because there'll continue being less of them.
Okay. And then I asked you a similar question before about reselling, but I'm asking about collecting now. For someone who wants to get into specifically collecting,
Hmm.
and like, what is your advice? Are there platforms to use, platforms not to use, people to go to, like specific things they should look for first? What is your whole advice to that person?
Right. Um, I feel like my advice would be when you first start to tend to lean more towards eBay and go for those like used shoes, like since you don't know what you're doing, since eBay has authenticity guaranteed and stuff like that. And once you get your feet wet, then you can move over to Instagram so you can know like, oh, I can find these people. They have good sneakers, and then you need to be able to verify them also so you don't get scammed on Instagram because that is a big problem as well. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that was pretty much everything. Yeah, that was about 30 minutes, so
All right.
25 minutes, so perfect. All right, appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right.